Hey y'all, so as of 12:01 a.m. today, Wednesday, September 27th, 2023, the WGA strike is officially over. The new minimum basic agreement that the WGA negotiated with the AMPTP has been tentatively approved and is being sent to members right now for ratification. And because of that, I thought I would scrap the video I was planning about making my lookbook and the tools I was using and decode some of the language used in this new MBA, used in the summary of the MBA that has been provided by the WGA, so that if you're not like industry proficient in terms of jargon, you can still read it and know exactly what the writers got. So I want to go through this quickly, and the best way to do that is through screen share, so let's get on in. So this right here is a comparison document between what the WGA proposed as of May 1st, 2023, what the AMPTP offered as May 1st, 2023, which is mostly rejected our proposal, refused to make a counter, and the tentative agreement as of Monday, September 25th, 2023. I'm going to go in step by step and tell you what you need to know so that you can read this yourself and sound smart and be excited about what gains the writers made, because a lot of this stuff makes writing a viable career once you get into the guild, which it wasn't necessarily going to be before this strike. And if you want to follow along, not on screen share, you can just go to WGA Contract 2023.org, and the front page will take you directly to this place where you can read all about the memorandum of agreement, which is the whole thing, the summary, and the update of the two-pager that compares the status of negotiations, which is what we are looking at in this video. So first, this 3.5% for most minimums. The MBA runs for 3 years. So this means that the first year of the MBA, the increase on the minimums is going to be 5%. The minimums are the minimum amount that a writer is allowed to be paid for whatever work that they're doing under the WGA contract. This minimum basic agreement is meant to be a starting point for writers to be able to negotiate their pay and their worth, but these are the bottom lines. So the minimum wage for writers is increasing 5% in the first year, then 4% from that 5%, and then 3.5% from the 4%. Then residual bases are also increasing. Residual bases are the minimums for residuals, and residuals is money paid to writers during a second or third or fourth, a repeat showing of the thing that they initially wrote. So when you see something that, like an old sitcom, or right now Suits on Netflix is super successful, streaming again on a new platform, the writers are getting paid for that. Right now it's a pittance, but it's going to get better because of this agreement. So the base, or the minimum residual amount, is going to increase as well, but some of them will have lower increases. Now we get into some word salad. Made for I can't even say it. Made for HB SVOD programs, get 96 plus minutes, receive 18% increase to initial compensation. HB SVOD stands for High Budget Subscription Video on Demand. Subscription video on demand are services like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Apple TV, Paramount Plus, Peacock, not Plus. All of these streaming services that you know and have somewhat mixed relationships with are subscription video on demand services. HB is high budget. So this part of the agreement applies only to those productions that are deemed high budget. And there's a section within the MBA that will define what high budget means. And you can go into the whole memorandum of agreement, or even go into the Writers Guild old memorandum of, or not memorandum, the old Writers Guild minimum basic agreement to get a sense of what those numbers are. But this is a sort of portmanteau of something that's considered high budget and SVOD, or subscription video on demand services. With that word salad explained, you already know what a residual base is. This is all, it's pretty easy to understand. It's common language after the fact. 96 plus minutes, so you have to have that running time in order to qualify. The budget of $30 million or more, so it's made for the SVOD. That is high budget, but in this case, you have to be $30 million or more. You get an 18% increase to initial compensation, $100,000 for story and teleplay. This is a credit situation. It's all basic language here now that you kind of know what some of these terms are. Next is something I'm super excited about as a feature writer. Require a second step if hired for a screenplay for 200% of minimum or less. It also applies to purchases of screenplays. So let's talk about step deals for a second. A A step deal is a deal that a writer makes with a production company or a studio to write a screenplay. They get 1 step, 2 steps, or 3 steps, typically. 3-step deals are very, very uncommon. 2-step deals, we're dying. 1-step deals have been the most common in recent years, and it's not good. Because what a step is essentially a draft. You get paid on a 1-step deal for 1 draft of a script. In a 2-step deal, you get paid for a draft of a script and a rewrite of that draft of a script based on studio notes. A 3-step deal would be a second rewrite or potentially a polish. You also can have a 1-step deal with the option for a second step, or a 2-step deal with an option for a 3rd step. And studios can choose whether or not to exercise that option. Now, in theory, a 1-step deal sounds good. Like, oh, you get paid to write a screenplay and you turn it in and that's the end. Except not quite. Because in practice, what's been happening with 1-step deals is that you get this deal to write a script and you're working with your producer or your development executive and you write the script and you turn it into them and they're like, okay, you only get 1 chance with this. So here's some notes, do a quick polish, fix it up, and then we'll send it in. And repeat until you're doing the work of 2 or even 3 steps before you even get 1 step going. And you're not even paid for that step until it finishes sometimes. And it just becomes this untenable thing, because if you're a writer who is working in this way, you're working on this script, not getting paid for it, and spending a lot of time on something instead of looking for your next job. Because while the WGA minimums are a good chunk of change, it's barely enough to survive in Los Angeles for a year. And you also have to do the work of pitching and writing and trying to find that next job in order to make writing a sustainable career. Let's say that you're getting paid $80,000 for this draft. $80,000 it's not great, but you can survive on that in LA. But then you're paying 10% to your agent, 10% to your manager. You have taxes you have to take care of. You probably have 5% to a lawyer. After all that, you're just getting your yearly salary in 1 chunk. And then you have to find your next job. And suddenly that $80,000, you're now down to like $50,000 after the taxes and paying your reps. And sometimes you don't even get that in time to pay a certain bill, and you're having to hold side jobs or another full-time job that you're working off on the side, and it's just a pain, and you have this 1-step deal that you're not getting paid for. It's a whole thing. So all that to say, a step is a draft of a script. So what this thing does, what this deal point does, is that if someone is hired for 200%, so twice the minimum or less, they get that second step guaranteed. So they don't have to be sitting here writing and hope that they get this script turned in so that they can get paid, then wondering where their next job's coming from. So they'll be able to write their script, turn it in, get notes, do revisions, turn them in, and make a living wage for a year in doing this, because sometimes it takes you another year to get a new job. It takes a year and a half. Like this makes writing feature screenplays an actual career. It just does for people who are not at the top tier, who don't come in with family money necessarily. This is amazing. So that's what a step deal is. A step is a draft, and a second step means you're guaranteed a rewrite after your first draft. That's it. Super simple. And also really exciting. That's the only one I'm really going to go into in depth because I'm so excited about it. Because for me as a feature writer, it means that once I get into the guild, as long as I can keep getting a job a year, a job every 18 months, I'll be able to do this for a living. And next we have flat deals. Flat deals are deals to write a single script. And again, 200% of minimum or less. And this also guarantees that you get to be a writer as a career because you get paid right away instead of waiting and hoping and crossing your fingers for the lower class, the middle class writers. Now we get into Appendix A, which is just comedy, variety, quiz, audience, other non-dramatic shows made for streaming, SVOD, or streaming video on demand. C/V in this case stands for comedy variety. Guarantees means, especially when in the context of 13-week, means that writers are guaranteed 13 weeks of employment upon starting a show. So budget break here means the amount of money the show must cost them to make at minimum in order for this clause to apply. Into television, so the increase in weekly rates of staff writers, story editors, and executive story editors by 5%, 4%, 3.5%. That's the same yearly salary minimum increase. And the exciting thing about this is that staff writers increase go into effect immediately. Staff writers are the lowest paid on any show, so this is another instance of the Guild wanting to ensure that the lower level of writers can continue to survive as writers and make this a career, which is really great to see. This SE/ESE is just story editor and executive story editor, which are in TV shows and TV rooms, there are certain levels that you get to of writers. It's sort of like the way in corporate America you have assistant, coordinator, manager, director, all of these hierarchical names. These are just some of the hierarchical names in television writing. The weekly rate is 9.5% above that which the story editor and executive story editor are paid, because as you rise in the ranks, you get more money. Now, development room. A development room is, if you've been following the WGA strike at all, you've probably heard about it. It's talked as maybe a mini room, which is when a studio will decide, oh, we have this idea for a TV show. We're not sure if we want to do it or not. So how about we convene a group of writers for a week and they talk about the show and they pitch some ideas and they outline it. And then we can look it over and decide if we want to move forward. And we can pay them weekly rates, because there are weekly rates within the WGA MBA, and they're not very good weekly rates, especially considering these writers are doing a bunch of work, breaking whole stories, being a TV writer's room without getting paid TV writer's room rates. So development rooms, weekly services are paid at 25% premium, meaning 25% more than like a tax essentially on the studios for creating these development rooms. The exciting thing about this is that weekly fees may not be credited against post greenlight room fees. A post greenlight room is just a regular TV writer's room. And there's also provisions within the MBA saying that if you're in the mini room, if you're one of these like 3 writers in a mini room, you can in certain circumstances, or will be in certain circumstances, in the actual writing room. So, because I know a lot of up-and-coming writers have been doing mini rooms to try to get their foot in the door, and then they just do all this work for a pittance and then don't even get an opportunity to be read for the show. And the agreement is trying to bridge some of that gap. All right, next. HBS VOD we already know, but HBA VOD is high-budget advertising-supported video on demand. So this is for a service like Tubi, where you can watch a show for free, but they'll put advertisements in between it. That's what it is in the HB is still the high budget, as with HBS VOD, where there are budget levels that dictate certain minimums be paid to writers when the show is in production. This really applies to scripts written for these platforms, as opposed to residuals, which have their own terms. And now we're into preserving the writer's room, which the WGA really wanted to ensure that up-and-coming TV writers are getting the chance to actually be in rooms, because the writer's rooms are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because studios are trying to save money by not hiring as many writers, but that's going to just create problems with TV in the future. Again, development room, we've talked about that. Those are those mini rooms before the show is greenlit. Post-greenlight rooms is the regular writer's room, and these are just the number of writers that are required based on the number of episodes. In this duration of employment, we've gone over a lot of this already. HBS VOD, guaranteed at least 10 consecutive weeks of work. That's what the guarantee is. Pay TV is another kind of way to exploit television. It's not subscription-based. It's basically you're paying for an episode of something. All right, now span protection. Span is a protection for writers on short order series to ensure that they're not just working and working and working and working on this short thing and they're not getting paid for it. So it means that their salary equates to 2.4 weeks of work per episode. And after that, they're done or they get paid overtime. The cap, the span cap, is your earnings on that specific show. You would have to stay under in order to have this span protection. So if you're making in this case, over $400,000 or over $375,000 in basic cable, that protection doesn't extend to you. But if you're making less than that, then you ensure that, like with a lot of these provisions, you're able to stop work and go find yourself another job to ensure that you can keep being a writer as a career. And spam protection before wasn't on limited series, but now it's allowed to be on closed-ended limited series. And a license fee-based residual is a residual that is paid out to a writer that is based on the amount of money that the streaming service or network or whoever is re-airing a show or film is the amount of money that they're paying in order to license or have the rights to play that. That's what that term is. Now I'm skipping past this viewership-based streaming bonus because you can probably figure out what it means, but basically this win ensures that writers get paid more money based on how many people watch their thing on these streaming services, HBS VOD. It's pretty rad. We already know about AVOD, advertisement-based video on demand, and all right, health fund, P&H is pension and health. Health fund. The WGA, despite, it's a Hollywood thing, but it's a union and it's protecting its members. So members get health insurance. Members have a pension. And when you're writing something, part of your salary is that the studio has to contribute a certain amount of money into the pension and health fund on your behalf, essentially. The health fund contribution rate by 0.5% in the second year of agreement from 11.5% to 12%, meaning they have to contribute 12% of the salary paid to the writer into the pension and health fund, 12% on top of what the writer's getting paid. So if the writer's getting paid $100,000, then the writer gets paid $100,000 and the studio also has to pay $12,000 into the health fund. And P&H contribution is a pension and health contribution, that percentage. A contribution cap means that there is a ceiling for how much that contribution can be. And finally, artificial intelligence. We know AI, we all know it. We know what that means. Literary material, source material, or assigned material. Hey y'all, it's Paige from the editing room. I did a really poor job of explaining this initially when I recorded, so I'm just doing it now real quick. Literary material is any material a writer produces, a script, a treatment, etc. Source material is something like a book or an article or something that a movie or a script or a TV show can be based on. And assigned material is material that the studio gives to the writer in order to base their work upon it. So those are what those terms mean. Back to me in the past. And that's it. The WGA MBA explained, the jargon explained, the terms explained, and now that that's done, I can finally get into planning my table read for Back to You. I'll be back next week with updates on that and my lookbook right here on Cake 5 Presents The Making Of. Have any questions? Drop them below. Thanks so much for watching and see you next time.